Hi, it's Sean Murphy. Welcome to the Thursday, February 3rd PATCA webinar meeting. We're fortunate today to have Ian Gibbs. Ian has a degree in astrophysics from St. Andrews in Scotland and a postgrad in education from Cambridge in England. He is the author of 5 books, including 23 tips to learn stuff better. He is the head of learning at Advantage Executive Training and the president of the Professional Speakers Association of Spain. Ian defines learnability as the capacity to approach, absorb, and apply new ideas and new skills. He has helped thousands become more effective learners through workshops and presentations on learning skills. I'm looking forward to this talk. Ian?
Thank you very much, Sean. As I was explaining to Sean just before everybody joined, I go around giving session skills that last about 2 days that fit all of this into the smaller that we have, and impossible, of course. What I'm actually going to what is about learning is getting people involved. I'm going to try and give a very quick overall picture of the sort of things that I deal with. And then I would like to open up the floor for people to, well, basically, metaphorically, pull up our chairs, sit down and just have a chat together where people can ask questions or sharing experiences. And hopefully that will allow us to get the best bang for your bucks from this time, right? So I think one of the things that I'd like to do to illustrate the importance of personal learning strategy as a school boy, I went to school at a school called Brook Comprehensive School. It was the same school that Sean Bean went to. That's about the only thing that I had going for it. And as I think in America you'd call it junior high secondary school, and in the equivalent of junior high, my ability as a student was extremely mediocre. I did okay in art. I could keep my head above water in maths and science, and everything else was pretty bad. And when I say pretty bad, I had the I got the school record for getting the worst exam result, official exam result in Spanish for the whole school. And my English was so bad that my English teacher refused to let me take the English exam at the end of the course. I had to pay for it myself. Fortunately, I just scraped through, but in no way was I an exceptional student. And I think it's fair to say that given that my house was at the bottom of the valley and that the school was at the top, every day it really was an uphill struggle trying to learn. And then we moved to senior high, the sixth form, as it's called in the UK. And we had the same teachers, but the subjects that I was persuaded to study was maths, physics and chemistry. And suddenly this miraculous change happened. I became really intelligent. It was amazing. Everything started to click. I got it. I did really well. One of the best people, one of the best students in the school. I got excellent grades, good enough to get in one of the top universities in the UK, St. Andrews University, to do astrophysics. And when I started university, I went there with this attitude that I am now really intelligent. I'm going to have this for breakfast. I'm going to leave with the best qualification possible. And my experience at university to start with was like a Ferrari driving through a swamp. It was suddenly really difficult again. And I struggled so much at university. I spent hours and hours of trying to learn the material. I found it I felt I was having to work twice as much as everybody else. And in the end, I graduated with a degree, which was all right, but it certainly wasn't what I thought I was going to get. Now, the main point of this little history is that at no point did any of my teachers, my parents, or myself question why it was that over those 2-year periods of sixth form, did I suddenly become really intelligent? And the point is that in general, maybe it's not in your part of the world, but with most people that I talk to, they associate being a good learner either with being intelligent or bright or having the right attitude or being gifted or one of these things, or having a really good teacher or a really good school or a learning environment, one of these things. And what I would like to point out is that in my experience, both of these things are important. Don't worry, I'm not saying that being bright is an advantage to learning or having a really good teacher is an advantage. But what makes all the difference is having the right personal learning strategies. And what I've realized with hindsight is that inadvertently during that 2-year period, I accidentally stumbled across the right learning strategies to help me get those subjects into my head and succeed. And so this is what I do. I explain this to people, and what I would like to do. I've got 3 main takeaways for you. Hopefully, if I've got time to go through these in these 20 odd minutes. And the first one is that being a good learner is using the right techniques. It's as simple as that. It's not just a case of wandering around, reading a book, going on a course, whatever. It's having the right techniques. And just by knowing that, can help you start making choices that can make a big difference in how you go about learning, right? And while we're on the subject of learning, here's another takeaway that I would like you to consider, and that is, what is the definition of learning in the first place? Because people have conversations about learning, but they never actually identify or establish that they're talking about the right thing. It might sound obvious, but even the definition that's in the Oxford English Dictionary, which is the one that I use, isn't satisfactory as far as I'm concerned about the workshops that I do. So would anybody just like to have a stab at what they think is a good definition of learning? Just turn your microphone on if you feel inspired and give it a shot.
You can also type it in if you like.
Mm-hmm. No, I see we're a reluctant group today. Well, I'll tell you what, just to save time, we'll get straight on with it. Oh, yep,
Sorry.
Steve.
Sorry about that. Hold.
That's a very convincing cat impersonation you're doing there, Steve. Right, I will get straight onto it. The definition is to acquire new knowledge or skill, which is fairly obvious. That's what it says in the dictionary, but I would like to add on to it, which can be applied when needed. This business about being able to apply it when needed is, for me, an obvious part of learning. That if you learn how to do to save somebody's life using heart massage, you want to be able to save somebody who's having a heart attack there and then. You don't want to have to go back over your notes and have to look it up again, do you? That's not really learning. That's sort of vaguely remembering. And therefore, one of the simple things is when you're learning, if you are then able to take that knowledge and skill and apply it at the moment that it's needed, then you know that you have learned something properly. Right. Now, in the 2-day workshop that I do, I help people establish their own personal learning strategies. And all of that is consolidated into one sheet, which in itself is not perfect. You can improve it by adding certain things which are important to you. But basically, I think it covers 80% of the important things about getting a learning strategy. And I'd like to very quickly talk you through this. This is the handout sheet that Sean was referring to. This is what it looks like. And what you have here,
For those playing our game at home, there's also a PDF in the chat you can download and take a look that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, if you've got something that you're interested in learning, then filling in this sheet and thinking about each of the issues that's covered, it almost guarantees that the amount or the way that you will approach it will help you get more out of your learning time, right? So, and it's basically divided into 4 areas. At the top here, you've well, as you can see, it says destination, then we've got the route, then we've got the fuel, and then we've got the arrival. The metaphor here is getting on a plane and traveling to the destination that you want to get to. And the 3 questions of destination, let's just see if I can get a bigger version of this. Here we go. Is making it very clear, what is it that you want to learn? Because that in itself is not necessarily an obvious question. You say, well, I want to improve my Spanish. Okay, but specifically, what do you want to learn? Then, what are your reasons for learning? Why is it important? And what are the key points that you need to learn? Right? So the first thing is to have it very clear what it is you want to achieve. Then the route, which I think is from what Annette was saying, this is maybe the key part of what you're interested in, is establishing, developing a strategy. For instance, where will you learn? When will you learn? What's the duration of those times, those sessions, and who can help? We're surrounded today by resources. I still feel that the education has not embraced how the internet works and the opportunities that we have. I think our educational experience are very much based on an industrial era attitude to education. And for instance, who is it that can help? Now, for instance, with Zoom, you can have conversations with people all over the world. And a lot of people, all you need to do is ask, and people are happy to give you advice, point you in the right direction, share their experiences with you. And I'm a bit worried about going into this too much, otherwise we're not going to have time. But people are a great resource. And then from where can you get your information? There's lots of different sources now. I mean, I'm speaking to people from Silicon Valley here, so I mean, sure, you say, yeah, we know all of this, right? And what other resources do you have? Places, things, experiences. Again, I don't want to go into it too much. I prefer to save that for the questions, right? Then there's the fuel. What is it that's going to keep you learning? Because one of the things about learning is that we don't just learn from exposing ourselves to information. Learning involves stretching yourself and repeating whatever it is that you're trying to do And this can be very off-putting. A lot of people, I know people who've had to go up playing the piano. I know people who've tried to study Spanish. I know people who've tried to learn various things, and they have been put off by their lack of immediate success. And so there are two things that fuel our success for learning, and that is to have motivators. What is it that's going to push you? Maybe it's peer pressure. Maybe it's the idea of getting a certificate. Maybe it's getting pay increase. Whatever it is, those things are going to help you make that mental and emotional effort to carry on through failure to succeed with what you want to learn. And the routines are also important, because if you can establish a routine, and a routine is not necessarily academic studying. Routines can be things like lunch and learn clubs at work, or getting together with a group of friends and discussing the breakthroughs that you've had. But doing this regularly, little by little, is going to build up and make a big difference. And then finally, and for me, this is the most important, it's how do you measure that your learning is a success, that you are making progress? Because sometimes we think that we're making progress when we're not. And then sometimes we think that we're not making progress when we are. Learning is a very counterintuitive process. When we're making mistakes, when we're making complete pig's ears of things, then that's actually when you're learning the most. If you're just going through a course and you say, oh, this is easy peasy, then maybe it's easy peasy because you're not stretching yourself that much and you're not learning as much as you think that you are. I'm sure you've had this experience, we all have, of where we've gone into an exam or been put in a situation where we think we knew what to do, and suddenly it all goes pear-shaped and you realize that you've not achieved what you wanted to. So the last part is, how do you assess your ability to remember what you've learned, to understand what you've learned, to be able to apply what you've learned, and to evaluate your success. All right. Now, that is what I spend 2 days doing with people. But to finally, well, I don't know, I feel like I've spent a while talking. We're coming up to the 20-minute mark. Before I continue, does anybody have any questions or any points that they would like to mention? Let me just turn off the screen share for the moment. And so does anybody have any comments or questions?
You're also welcome to use the chat, and I'll voice it if that's easier, but please ask away.
I have a comment, which is, I think that having this kind of sheet and defining all the pieces is the way that people keep talking about having SMART goals, measurable, and you can break it up and blah, 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 and all of that. So I think it kind of continues the line of not making it too general, like, oh, I want to learn a language. Yeah, but what are you going to do with it? Are you going to be reading books in it? What level of books? Are you going to be watching TV shows with it? That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing new here. This is a different version of that sort of thing.
But I think it gives you really good direction. Sorry to cut you off. It gives you good direction when it breaks it up to very, very specific questions that you will answer. Where are you going to do it? How long are you going to take to learn every time you have a session? And you might have different sessions. I mean, if you learn a language, you might be learning to write. You might be learning to read. Maybe you're just listening. So you break it up to different types. And I think it's very, not just organized. I think it kind of brings you to this place of ready to learn.
Indeed. Anything else, or shall I move on?
No, I go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
Yeah, kind of related. What struck me most is this repeating, I'm so at that, not doing that, like I get greedy and it's like, oh, this seminar, that seminar is so interesting. And then when I realize, and a lot of things I know I'm forgetting, but when I realize when I am really not applying is when I try telling somebody, it's like, oh, I attended this exciting seminar and like try to explain. It's like, oh, I already forgotten and it's like 2 days ago, something like that. So I am trying to be more mindful about what I listen to and then so kind of spill into other things you said, I think. Why are you learning and where you can learn it?
If I could follow up from what you just said there, Takako, yeah, is that one of the problems that we have as far as being a successful learner goes is avoiding what I call the learning illusion. The learning illusion is where you get the feeling that you've learned something, but actually you haven't at all, which is where my definition of learning comes in. When I give talks to a big crowd of people, I ask them the question. Here, I think maybe the generation will work. I ask people about this book. I don't know if any of you have read this book, The 7 Habits of...
Yes,
No?
yes.
You have, right? Okay. So Sean, I'm going to use you as a guinea pig here, right? You've read The 7 Habits of
Stephen Covey. Yes.
I'm looking for his name. Right. Okay. So without well, could you say what those 7 habits are?
Well, I'll give you 2, which are ones I find most important. The first is to begin with the end in mind.
Yep.
And the second is to sharpen the saw.
Yep.
Which is to improve your tooling. So there's another 5 good ideas in there. Those are the ones that I use most frequently.
Yeah. Okay. But can you remember those other 5?
Probably only at gunpoint. I mean, the reality is it's I don't apply them as much. Now maybe I should, but I don't.
That's right. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot there.
No, that's fine.
The point is that we read, I mean, I don't know about you, but I read quite a lot of nonfiction. And when I used to read nonfiction, I would read the book and then go around telling people, oh yeah, I've read the 7 Habits, or I've read From Good to Great, or I've read this, I've read that. But after a few months, the amount of information you actually remember is extremely small. You know, you're listening to me now and you say, well, okay, there's this guy from England and he's talking about learnability and whatever, and it's, you know, it's fine. Maybe in a few days, if you had to ask, if somebody asked you what it was that we talked about, you may be able to remember 10%, 20% of what we covered. And in 6 months' time, you might not even remember that we had this session at all, because all the other stuff that comes into your headspace, and it's like, okay, well, you know, this project, that project, this learning, that course, it's so easy to lose it and let it get buried underneath a pile of stuff. And so what I'd like to do is the third takeaway for you is a very simple learning tool that I share with at talks, which is much easier to take in than the learning strategies sheet that I've just shown you, because that takes 2 days to get hold of. But this little tool is something that hopefully within just 5 minutes, you can actually take away, remember, and start applying, or at least measuring against how you're doing and how other members, if you've got members of your family that are studying at the moment, then you can help them by going through this with them as well. All right. So let me go back to my screen share. Where are we? I think we're there. Right. And in fact, I don't really need to the screen share, but I'll use it anyway. It's what I call the learning ladder. And the way to remember it is from our hand with a little finger at the bottom and the thumb at the top. And to try and help the mnemonics of the learning ladder, you label each finger starting from the bottom, A, B, C, D, and E, as you can see on the screen here. And these, for me, represent the 5 main stages of learning. And if you are being an efficient learner or an effective learner, you're doing it the best that you can, then the higher up you are on this ladder, then the better you are doing. Right? So A, B, C, D, and E. What do A, B, C, D, and E stand for? Right. A is for acquisition, acquiring new information, new ideas. And once we have acquired it, then we are aware of it. This is how most people, I would say 99% of the students that go through the education system come out feeling that this is what learning is all about. Because, you know, once you've read, for instance, the 7 Habits, then if you went back and reread it, you would remember, or at least recognize, everything that you're reading because you've already read it once. Doesn't mean to say that you could recall it to start with without opening the book, but you would recognize it. And because you recognize it, then your brain fools yourself into believing, well, because I recognize it, then I must have learned it. But really, it's the lowest type. Level B, well, I use the expression to bring back the basic information. But level B is basically being able to recall whatever it is that you're learning without needing a prompt. It's basically quizzing yourself, self-testing, or if you're learning with a friend or in a group, testing each other. You know, can you remember this? What was that? Maybe tomorrow you could email each other or set yourself a reminder that says, can you remember what those 3 key takeaways were from the meeting that we had yesterday? So it's this business of trying to remember. And memory is like a muscle. The more you use it, the better you are at doing it. This, you know, is well, I'm sure you get the idea. I don't want to labor the point. So being able to remember when you want, or to recall when you want, the stuff that you've been studying, that takes you straight away up 1 level in your learning ladder. C then is comprehension. It's being able to understand the stuff that you're studying. And I was really pleased with Takako's comment about talking about the things that you're learning. One of the things that I do regularly when I coach my clients is I'm constantly getting them to talk and explain to me about the things that they're learning. And you can see in their faces when they are struggling to put into words what it is that they're trying to study. And they find it surprisingly difficult. One way to see if anybody has actually learned or understands what they've been studying is to get them to vocalize their ideas. Because it's one thing to have a sort of idea in the back of your head and think, oh yeah, I get that. But it's completely different to be able to put those ideas into words and express them in a coherent way so that other people can understand them. And I think it was, there's a scientist called Feynman, who I'm sure you may have heard of, and he was the king of explaining things to people so that he would be able to understand it, and make sure that they could understand it. In fact, I think Albert Einstein, they say that he used to talk about relativity to his cleaning lady. Not that he was interested in his cleaning lady learning the theory of general relativity, but by vocalizing his ideas, he started to understand it better himself. And I assure you, if it's good enough for Albert, then it's good enough for the rest of us, right? D, what does D stand for? D stands for doing. What I mean doing, I mean putting out there into the real world the ideas that we're studying ourselves. I'm sure you've come across the idea that if you teach something to somebody else, then you learn it better yourself. And this is an example of where actually physically manipulating the ideas and mixing them around and putting them together helps us to learn them better. It doesn't have to be teaching. It could be giving a presentation, making a video about it. I get some of my clients to make videotapes of themselves explaining what it is that they think they understand. And when they look back at them, that in itself is a learning experience. So the doing is the fourth level. And then finally is E is for evaluation. If you get to the point where you can say, well, look, I've learned to do this, or I'm learning this, but is there anything else? What are the weak points? What doesn't fit? What's missing? What else is there? Are there any exceptions? You know, all of these questions where you start to evaluate the stuff, then you know that you really are at the top of your learning ladder. And so with the effective learning strategies sheet that I've given you, you can apply this measurement to your strategies to see what's missing, what bits aren't you including in your learning strategy, and therefore do something about it. So let me just stop sharing again. And so with this learning ladder, you can start to say, well, look, am I just exposing myself to information? Am I on the bottom rung? Or am I doing stuff which is taking me up and up and up so that I'm becoming a more effective learner? All right. Again, that was a big chunk of me talking. Again, questions, comments, experiences?
Just wanted to say, Ian, that was a really amazing presentation. It reminds me a lot of another method I use, the Bloom's taxonomy method, where it goes through the 6 stages of learning. There's knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, I think. And the whole structuring of that was very, very much reminiscent and almost near that. And I just thought that was a really cool insight that I wanted to share.
Thank you, Connor. It is amazing to me. I'm sorry, was it Steve? You said that you actually learned how to learn when you're studying, and this is really impressive, because one of the things with, for instance, with Bloom and his friends and cognitive psychologists, is the problem with cognitive psychologists is they tend to keep themselves to themselves. And even now in what 2022, a lot of the stuff that the cognitive psychologists know about how we learn is not being passed on to the people at the front. And I think, you know, my neighbors, I've got a guy down the road who runs his own drone business. I've got the next door neighbor here. She's head of sustainability in a company. Neither of these jobs existed when they left college. They've had to learn these skills afterwards. And I think if, you know, being good at science, being good at coding, being good at maths or social skills, whatever, are important. But surely one of the most important skills that we can be helping students with is learning skills, because the idea that once you've left college and you've got your certificate, you don't have to learn anything else is that went out a long time ago. I'm sure as all of you know. Steve.
Sorry, so I'm a New Yorker, so I want to apologize first. We tend to be very direct. So I have 6 different things I want to offer to you and the group on learning. You know, I mentioned that I learned how to learn early. And I actually talked a little bit about in this group. The first thing is preparing to learn. And I don't see it in your thing. I don't know if these are in your stuff. I don't think they are. Let me share it. And that is energy management. What time of the day are you best at learning? Learning happens for all of us at different places. I know for myself, if I try to learn in the afternoon, it's just not going to happen. So I try to always, if I've got a learning, I try to set myself up for an hour or 2 in the morning where I'm doing learning and no interruptions. So that way I stay on subject. That's the first thing. The second thing is a great extension to your chart. If you could go into resources, I think all of us always need resources to learn. What right now, YouTube is just an incredible resource, but I also go to free courses in MIT, or I found different places where I can go to find subject matter that is interesting to me and will help. So I would greatly extend resources, and that could be a, if you will, a way. I don't know if you're making, if you have this online and you're making money, but that could be an area that is live, always being added to, and maybe by subject, by area that you're trying to learn. So I could, like, let's say I want to learn about AI. Here's some resources that people have found really good for learning. Because even on YouTube, 1 out of every 6 YouTube or 1 of every 7 videos is really valuable and the other 6 are not. So maybe there's a voting thing that happens for each subject. And I'm going fast because I know you don't have much time. So I apologize at some level. I could do this.
Yeah, you're doing brilliant, Steve. Don't stop.
All right. The next is, there's a whole different, in learning, you got to decide, are you on a short-term learning path or a long-term? Because you have to take different approaches to each of them. If it's short-term, you quickly try to grab certain elements of what you're trying to get to, but you're not going to do the research and the study into where to find those things. To jump around and grab things quickly. So I always decide, is this a long-term learning thing or short-term? I'm writing another book on artificial intelligence. That's a long-term, and I'm trying to find the sources, the resources that I need to get to stimulate me. The next is reminders. How do I remember the last place I left myself or where to go next? And I always, on every set of notes, I always say where I left and where I should go next. So that way, second I come back to those notes, I know where to go next. And the other part, you kind of got to it a little bit with using your knowledge. The faster you can use that knowledge, or if you write it out, you're going to learn it that much better and faster. And next is, what are the things that you have to learn first on a more complicated learning is vocabulary. You have to understand the vocabulary or you're not going to understand what people are talking about. So I always attack the vocabulary, and I never let myself skip over a word or words that I don't understand. I always incorporate those into my notes. So the next time I come, I still may not remember what that set of words or terms mean, but I've got it right in my notes. And I use Word, and I use all the aspects of Word so that I can have a table of contents. I build up a table of contents to my notes. So every set of notes I can quickly get to, and I can see where all the different aspects. If there are definitions, I've got a section for definitions, and it's all in the table of contents. So I come right back. Again, this is for longer term things. Come right back to that. And I think there was one more. learning in some situations means not talking. So that if you're talking more than 50% in any conversation, you're not learning. That's my opinion. I leave it there. There you go.
That was great, Steve. I don't think that I'm going to be much help by agreeing with your points. And so I'm going to say, there's two things where maybe our ideas don't quite coincide, which is actually where the learning opportunities come from. You know, paradoxes, I think it was Niels Bohr that said, paradoxes are the ideal learning opportunity. So the two things, first of all, from what you've just said, I guess that when you talk about learning, you're actually talking about what I call studying. You referred about setting time so that you could read your books or you could do your course, etc. And what I want to point out is that learning is not just studying. We learn from many, many different ways. And we learn from trying and stretching ourselves, maybe by volunteering for new projects that we've got no idea how to do. We learn from just, I've been, maybe, I'm sure maybe you've all been in this situation. I've been to workshops, 2-day workshops, where I've learned more in the coffee breaks talking to other people than I have during the actual workshop. I feel that I've just been wasting my time. But it's those conversations afterwards where you actually do the learning. And so learning isn't synonymous with studying. Obviously, when you study, hopefully, if you study in the right way, you learn, but you can learn in so many other ways. The second thing is that a lot of the things that you've talked about are what I would call formal learning. I live, although I say that I live in Barcelona, I actually live in a forest outside Barcelona. And I live, I'm surrounded by trees here. Right outside my window, if it wasn't nighttime, which it is here, I would be able to see this beautiful, vast oak tree. And I use this tree as a metaphor for how not the learning process, but the learning system works. Because when you start a new job, when you start a new position, you know exactly what it is that you need to be able to do that job well. You know the things where they're going to head, and it's like the trunk of the tree. It's solid, it's well defined, you know exactly where it's going. And then as you become better at your job and better and more experienced and more expert, then you can start to diversify. You can go off on this branch, you can go off on that branch, etc. And in that branch, there's still a lot of people who've traveled along that. And again, for what it is that you need to become an expertise in that area, then there's still a lot of material, books, videos, courses, etc., which can help you learn. But at some point, you become so good or so specialized in what you do that the amount of formal learning resources that there are out there is actually very, very small. And if you want to perfect what it is that you do, to become really, really good at it, it may be that the resources that are out there are extremely limited. And, with what we've faced with coronavirus, we can be put in a situation or an unusual circumstance where really there is nothing that you can, no book or no course that's specifically helpful to you to learn for that situation. And it's these specialist topics where having a personal learning strategy really becomes useful. Because, you want to learn how to speak, I don't know, German, and there are a myriad of teachers and trainers and courses and stuff that you can buy that will more or less steer you in the right direction. Some of them are good, some of them are better. But if you say, I want to learn, I mean, I'm afraid I have no idea how the jobs that you're in or what the challenges you're facing at the moment, but you pick on one thing where you think, well, I'd really like to become better at this particular little snag that I've got. Maybe it's being empathetic. I'm losing my language here. With a particular client. Maybe it's the way that you pitch your business to other people. You want to be able to become slightly better in your salesmanship or salespersonship, as I should say. These things are not easy to buy a course and learn how to do because they're very much tailored to your specific environment, the way that you are, the particular client that you have and the product that you have. And it's especially important that when there aren't any resources around to point you in the direction that you need to go, that you can say, well, look, there may not be a book around, but I do know that this is how I could put together a learning strategy for that particular point. And if I was going to do it, then these are the things that I should be considering.
If I may respond just quick. So studying, I think it's definitely learning that I'm doing, because in writing my artificial intelligence books, I don't have all the answers. I'm looking to be excited. I want to hear somebody talk about ideas that I haven't incorporated yet or will cause new ideas for me. To me, that's the difference between studying. I'm looking to do a test or to just be competent in a certain area versus goal-directed so that I can improve what I have in my head, what I'm creating. So that's number one. And the other one was, I don't remember the other one now. So you mentioned studying, and then one other thing I don't remember. I tried to write it down while you were talking. But
So
the other
David,
thing was, sorry, go on.
So David and Chuck have their hands up. David, why don't you go
Sure.
next, and then we'll get Chuck.
Sorry, good.
Yes, thank you very much, Sean. Great topic. Thank you, Ian. Thanks, Steve. And Connor, thank you for your notes as well. To me, learning and quite frankly, teaching/learning goes through different stages in life, and it also depends on governance of the environment and how we deal with these kind of things. See, we go teach. We have teachers to teach us things that we don't know through life. And then we go upper class and we have instructors who show us what we have been taught is good to be used in this kind of environment, as you said, Ian, the right technique to be used at the right time when we need it. And then we have upper stage in life, you guys, us here, trying to learn from each other, which is totally different. It's gone beyond the boundaries of governance and land and how we apply it. Here we try to see what we can learn. It's kind of how I can apply different things and help others to elevate the way they are, the way they do, the way they think. And quite frankly, for instance, the memory enhancement has different ways of applications and how to go through. We passed that era. People here are not college students. You're all at the level that you are mentoring and helping others to learn. So that's why we are here to learn from each other how we can elevate others' life, as opposed to what I know here, what you know here. I'm here to learn, and thank you. Greatly appreciate for everybody's input on that.
Chuck?
Thank you, David.
Thank you. In leading cross-functional teams of leaders and creators, we must communicate with extroverts and introverts. I put in the chat a textbook, Type, Talk at Work by Otto Kruger. We're time constrained, and I'm basically, extroverts need to talk to latch in memory, but introverts need those precious pauses. Thank you.
All right. Any other final remarks? I'm going to give Ian the last word if there are no more questions, but I'm going to give another 30 seconds if folks have final things they want to say or suggest. Well, this has been quite exhilarating. So Ian, I'll give you the last word.
Okay. One of the things I was wondering if anybody had been paying attention was going to ask, but you haven't, is what happened to my 2 years in sixth form that made me so intelligent? What was the difference between my junior high and my university days? What was it that I was doing right? And the answer to that is that unlike the time at junior high and at university, when we were studying at senior high, we had gaps in our timetables. We didn't have classes all the time. And so what would happen is that a few of us who had, you know, an hour's gap in our timetable, rather than leaving our homework for after school, we would go to the library and sit around a table and we would do our homework together. And because there was nobody else around, because everybody else was in class, we would quite simply discuss amongst ourselves, oh, this question, how are you going to do it? What's the problem that you're having? Oh, I can't do this. How does this work? Oh, well, I'm doing it like this, etc. And we would simply spend an hour discussing those ideas and explaining the bits that other people were having difficulty with, explain it to them. And so just by doing that, just that one activity for an hour, couple of hours every week, was helping us to remember what it is that we were trying to learn. We were talking about it so that we were understanding it, and we were teaching it to each other. And I swear that just that one little thing made such a huge difference to our ability to learn during those years. And it's whether it's explaining things to other people, getting members of your family, if you've got kids or grandkids, getting them to explain it to you, it can make a huge difference. It can make people suddenly realize that just because they are struggling, it doesn't mean to say that they're not capable of learning. It just means that they're not using the methods that fit with them. And I've seen students and adults who've been struggling with learning languages, for instance, once they know what they're supposed to be doing, it can give them results. It can increase their self-confidence. It's like turning a little switch on in their bike. Suddenly they're like a little clockwork robot that just goes for it. And that in itself, that is priceless.
Well, on behalf of Pat and everybody, Ian, I want to thank you for a fantastic talk, very thought-provoking, a lot of good stuff. The handout is available, and we're going to post the audio or the video from this as well, because there's a lot of good tips in here.
Okay.
And
I hope everybody got at least one thing out of it that they felt was useful, even if it's just to have their thoughts provoked a little bit.
No,
Thank
I
you.
thought, and I appreciated everybody's input as well. I want to second Chuck's vote for Type Talk, and thank Steve for his contribution as well.